case of Paula Ortega. In early 2023, the city of Sangalki in Ecuador's Pichincha region was rocked by a tragic incident. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that shocked the community, but its motive, a mere $600 theft. Could the life of 37-year-old Paula Ortega Alcocer really be valued at just $600? Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figueroa Lara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. After her studies, Paula actively contributed to the growth of her family's business, which specialized in party goods manufacturing. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and renowned in Sangalki and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's father, in his youth, began building a business supplying party goods across Ecuador. The venture became quite successful, enabling him to start his own production of balloons, piñatas, and other festive paraphernalia. This expansion led to the opening of several stores. The Alcocer family's party shops were located not only in Sangalki, but also in Ecuador's capital, Quito. Each family member played a role in the development and maintenance of their enterprise. The father expanded the main production line, opening new workshops for balloons, garlands, caps, and various party items. Each of the three children managed a store, tailoring it to their vision. Paula's entrepreneurial spirit led her beyond just managing the store. She organized a party planning service within the company, which turned out to be a great success. It seemed Paula had found her calling, bringing joy to people, which made her truly happy. While the business ventures of the Ortega family flourished for a long time, unfortunately, Paula Ortega's personal life was not as successful. Despite her youthful and joyous demeanor, she faced significant hardships in her private life. Paula's first marriage to Carlos Pedro turned out to be unhappy. After the birth of their daughter, Carlos developed an alcohol addiction. He began disappearing from home and stealing money from Paula's store. His infidelity was the last straw, leading Paula to end the marriage and find herself alone with her daughter. This period was particularly challenging for Paula as she lost hope in finding personal happiness. However, the psychological support of her family and her passion for her work helped her regain a sense of normalcy in her life. A decade later, Paula met Christian Diego. A tall, dark-haired, and handsome man, Christian was 4 years younger than Paula. Having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was cautious with the persistent young suitor. Christian proved to be calm and reliable, quickly bonding with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed Paula. After 2 years of relationship, her heart warmed to him, leading to a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian embraced Paula's daughter as his own, and they soon welcomed another daughter, Maria. Christian and Paula spent 5 years together, with Christian fully integrating into Paula's father's company. He was entrusted with finding locations for new stores, which often kept him away from home. Coming from a modest working-class family, Christian had always dreamed of owning a large business. Unfortunately, some people can conceal their dark sides so well that one might live for years alongside ruthless criminals without suspecting a thing. However, the truth eventually comes to light when evil erupts in the most unexpected ways. Paula Ortega and her husband, Christian, appeared to be the epitome of a happy, successful couple to their family, friends, and neighbors. However, this perception was only surface deep. In February, Paula's father passed away after a long illness. His death not only devastated the family, but also turned their business upside down. Christian, driven by a desire for power and the wealth it brought, eagerly sought to take Paula's father's place in the business. However, his lack of skill led to one failed deal after another. As a result, Christian began to vent his frustration on his family, initially in secret, but later openly. He began to abandon his family, indulging in a life of debauchery. Women and alcohol became his escape into a world of pleasure and recklessness. With Paula's father no longer there to restrain him, Christian's true nature began to surface. Having already experienced a traumatic marriage, Paula refused to endure this behavior again. The couple's home became a battleground of endless scandals, revealing Christian's true nature as an ambitious egotist, craving only power and unquestioned obedience. After a particularly nasty argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing her husband's reaction. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. The news of this drastically changed Christian's behavior. Unwilling to lose his place in the successful family, he stopped his outrageous conduct and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be caught up in a whirlwind of confusion, and professed his love and value for his family. His eloquence persuaded Paula. Not wanting to be alone again, she gave him a second chance. In a gesture of reconciliation, Christian suggested organizing a romantic dinner at their home. Paula agreed. She sent their daughters to her parents' house and began preparing for the evening. Inside, she was aflutter with excitement. Deep down, she still dreamed of a happy, strong family and was doing everything she could to preserve it. The evening at the Ortega home was one of celebration and comfort. The living room was lit up with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly illuminated by the yellow glow of candles. Christian uncorked a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night could have been genuinely reconciliatory had it not been for a sudden proposal from Christian that disrupted the peace. Christian, a co-owner of the Alcauser Company, revealed to his wife a significant misstep. In his pursuit to replace Paula's father and gain full control, he had made a costly mistake in an important tender, leading to substantial losses for the company. Now the firm desperately needed a new investor, implying that a part of the company would officially change hands. Paula was adamantly against this, believing her father's business should remain a family affair. Despite Christian's persuasion, she stood her ground, infuriating him. He had already found an investor and was eager to complete the deal without complications. Their dinner, and by extension, their relationship, soured. January 2nd, 2023 seemed like any other day. Paula took her younger daughter to the playroom before heading to her shop for work. She had a large order to prepare involving assembling balloon fountains and party decorations for a themed event. During her lunch break, two men knocked on the shop's door. Although closed, Paula opened it, expecting a courier to pick up the balloon bouquets. The men, slim and dressed identically as if they were twins, startled her with their dark hoodies. They lingered, scanning the shop before splitting up. As Paula called out to them stating the shop was closed for lunch, they cornered her against the wall. The tension of the silent scene was broken by a knock on the glass door. The men hastily exited the shop. A smiling young courier arrived, unwittingly rescuing Paula from the unknown assailants. Shaken, Paula handed over the package, closed the shop, and with trembling hands, called her mother. She was visibly frightened, a sentiment she expressed over the phone. Paula's mother suggested reporting the unsettling incident at her shop to the police, but Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright since nothing harmful had actually occurred. She didn't reopen her shop that day, her thoughts consumed by Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the two mysterious men. Seeking solace, Paula decided to take a stroll through the city. She stopped at a nearby cafe for some coffee, walked through the park to breathe in the fresh air, and then visited her sister. Over cups of fragrant tea, they engaged in a heart-to-heart conversation. Overwhelmed by the day's shocking events, Paula confided in her sister, not only about the scary encounter at her shop, but also about the difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had drastically changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and openly being unfaithful. Paula chose not to mention his proposal about merging the company with a new investor, as she habitually kept her personal struggles to herself. But that day, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame over tolerating such demeaning treatment. "He's a peculiar being. My sister was lively, happy, cheerful, enterprising, hardworking, an extremely gentle and kind mother. She should have been receiving energy from him," Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, would later say. Paula spoke of her long-term life plans, her desire for her daughters to grow up and become professionals, and her intention to continue her business. She was selfless and tirelessly hardworking, Adriana recalled. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. A phone call from Christian interrupted her. He was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would come to the shop to pick her up as well. His hurried speech was interspersed with children's voices. Paula didn't get a chance to tell him about the frightening incident at her shop, especially since she suspected him to be involved. Reluctantly, Paula returned to work, once again prioritizing her family's well-being over her own. She didn't have to wait long. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't deny his little princess. He informed Paula that the girls were at home and eagerly waiting for hamburgers for dinner. In what has become a modern family tradition, Christian took Paula not to the nearest fast food joint, but to a restaurant courtyard at a shopping center several blocks from their home. Parking the car beside a secluded wall and locking it securely, he left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a taxing day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the impending danger. Shortly, she recognized two familiar figures near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. Recognizing them as the unexpected visitors from her shop, Paula tried to stay calm, trusting that the car was secure and Christian would return soon. Suddenly, the car's lights flashed and the door locks disengaged. In a panic, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms. But she was trapped with no escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat, while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before darkness enveloped her. Paula sustained 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. After the brutal attack, the assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood. Frantically, he called emergency services, but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving necessary medical attention. Christian, overwhelmed by grief and shock at the loss of his wife, reacted with loud cries and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The sudden violent end of Paula Ortega left a community in shock and a family in profound grief, raising questions about the motive and identity of the attackers. The initial theory of the prosecution was a violent end inflicted during a robbery. It was later discovered that $600 and a gold necklace were missing from Paula's purse. This began an investigation. The prosecution's theory was confirmed when footage from city cameras showed 2 unknown men who had visited Paula's store earlier that day in the vicinity. Both were in hoodies, making it impossible to create a clear image of their faces, and their vague descriptions provided no clarity. 2 months after the tragic event, Paula's family demanded justice, but the investigation was at a standstill. A turning point came when Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, gave testimony casting doubt on Christian's innocence. She informed the investigators about a conversation she had with Paula on the day of the incident. Adriana also mentioned that Christian regularly committed infidelity and domestic violence against Paula, who was contemplating divorce. This provided a perfect motive as Christian, driven by ambition, could not afford to lose his wealth and status in the event of a divorce. The prosecution investigated this angle. During a search of their home, incriminating messages were found on Christian's phone, indicating multiple affairs and turbulent marital relations. A critical piece of evidence was documentation prepared for the transfer of the company to a private individual, which Paula had refused to sign. Following these revelations, the incident was investigated as a suspected homicide. As the prosecution continued to gather information implicating Christian Diego, new evidence emerged, unraveling the complex web of the couple's relationship. 2 weeks after the incident, we found out he transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, said Adriana, Paula's sister, adding another layer of suspicion to the already convoluted case. The most shocking aspect, as claimed by relatives, was that Christian made a payment using Paula's account while she was dying from her injuries. Instead of immediately helping his gravely wounded wife, Christian seemingly bided his time. Investigations confirmed this information. The identity of the woman who received the transfer from Christian that day was established as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. Urgently summoned for questioning, she revealed that she had noticed her bank card missing a couple of days earlier, but didn't think much of it as her brother often used her card. The electronic payment records showed a transfer of $2,000 from Christian on January 2nd at 20:05. However, Laura denied any acquaintance with Christian. Her solid alibi at the time of the incident absolved her of any involvement. She was released and the investigation hit a dead end again. Days later, Laura returned to the police stating her brother had returned the bank card as she had suspected. She provided a full description of her brother's appearance, which matched one of the criminals caught on surveillance cameras near the car. In the chaos of fleeing the crime scene, one attacker forgot to pull up his hood. The identities of Byron and Morton Castillo, two repeat offenders with a substantial criminal history, were established. The brothers were apprehended. But what could possibly link two seasoned criminals to a seemingly respectable and successful family man? Further investigation revealed that the attacks on Paula had been carried out repeatedly by the Castillo brothers. But why were these repeat offenders targeting this young woman? On December 8, 2022, Paula Ortega faced a harrowing incident at a gas station when her car was stolen. Distracted by a young man, his accomplice quickly jumped behind the wheel and sped off. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car that day. Surveillance footage identified the two familiar culprits. Coincidentally, on the day of the theft, Paula unknowingly came face to face with her future assailant. However, the car theft case took an unexpected turn when Christian intervened, claiming the thieves had contacted him. He met with them and retrieved all of Paula's personal belongings, including her wallet. This development cast further doubt on Christian's innocence. Seasoned investigators were puzzled by the widower's boldness in shielding the criminals. Surveillance cameras played a crucial role in identifying the carjackers. As Christian realized he was under suspicion, he concocted a new defense narrative involving extortion by two criminal brothers demanding a large sum of money. But before he could deploy his version of events, the police executed a swift interrogation strategy. Separating the suspects and suggesting one had confessed, they obtained a confession from Martin Castillo. He admitted that more than 2 months earlier, Christian had paid them $2,000 to murder his wife, promising another $2,000 after the deed. During a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal knife wounds on the terrified woman. Realizing the crime was uncovered, he remorselessly divulged all details of their arrangement with Christian. Martin revealed that the car theft and the attack on Paula's shop were also parts of Christian's plan to pressure her. By chance, Paula lived a few hours longer than intended. On November 29, 2023, all 3 suspects appeared in court. The prosecution presented a comprehensive picture of the murder day, pieced together from various sources. Videos from surveillance cameras in the area where Christian parked the car, subjected to audio and video forensic analysis, unveiled a chilling soul-freezing narrative. In chilling surveillance footage, Christian Diego is seen exiting his car and heading towards a shopping center elevator. Moments later, he remotely unlocks his car from half a block away, allowing 2 assailants to enter the vehicle and attack Paula. The prosecutor's report noted Christian's odd behavior post-attack, repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, pausing, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Surprisingly, upon finding his wife bleeding profusely, he showed no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a distant hospital. Christian's actions, meticulously reconstructed from surveillance videos, particularly in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, were cold and calculating. As she bled in the car but was still alive, Christian, standing nearby, callously transferred money to his accomplices for the assault. Paula's family lawyers urged the court to consider these videos as aggravating factors in the crime. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves the crime was premeditated. Hours before the attack, around 1:30 p.m., 2 individuals entered Paula's store, dropped off nearby by Christian. This implies the crime was intended to occur earlier during the lunchtime closure when Paula was alone. Prosecutor Marlon Calderon highlighted inconsistencies. How did the assailants know the couple would be at the eatery if they weren't tailing them? Yet they arrived on time to commit the crime. Christian's actions, not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the eatery, his 1,000 times pacing before aiding his wife, phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic are key evidence for charging him with orchestrating the femicide. Femicide, defined as the intentional murder of a woman simply because she is a woman, was a central theme in the trial of Christian and Paula Ortega's troubled relationship. Shockingly present in today's society, this hate crime was exemplified through Christian's younger age, which seemed to fuel his contempt and abuse towards Paula. Despite her success, Paula lived in a metaphorical golden cage, masking and enabling her husband's tyrannical behavior, allowing him to assert dominance. Years of silence culminated in Christian's sinister plot to seize control of Paula's thriving party empire and gain sole guardianship of their daughter, Maria. Testimonies from over 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, alongside thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's true motives and objectives. Without legal signing rights, he sought to coerce Paula into transferring her company shares. However, his plan failed. Christian didn't physically harm Paula, but inflicted severe psychological abuse, artfully concealed under the guise of a perfect family life. According to the Prosecutor General's report, video evidence led to Christian's preventive isolation as the crime's orchestrator. This measure isn't an arrest but a strategy to neutralize a societal threat. Following this action, Christian planned to flee. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, accused of orchestrating his wife's demise, his defense team worked tirelessly to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute crucial evidence like surveillance footage and falsified company transfer documents. Desperate, his defense counsel, realizing the gravity of the situation, advised Christian to flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and suggesting he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. However, this plan to escape justice failed. Christian's search for Central American flight tickets raised alarm bells with the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly ordered an 8-hour detainment of Christian Diego, followed by charges and the disclosure of case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Pending trial, the suspect was held in preliminary detention, pursued as the alleged mastermind behind a heinous act that left 2 young children motherless and an entire family grieving an irreplaceable loss. The Ortega family demands justice for this atrocious crime, emphasizing the devastating impact on the children and their irreplaceable loss. In a case that gripped public attention, the jury concluded that Christian and his 2 accomplices were guilty of a meticulously planned intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful Christian and his associates were sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Rummenyawe expressed their solidarity with the tragic loss of Paula Alcocer. The institution extends its deepest sympathies to the family and friends affected by this incident. The unfortunate demise of this esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife who contributed significantly to the canton's development and brought prosperity to those in her circle is deeply mourned. Their statement read, Paula's case emerged as a prominent instance of violence against women following the Latin American Association for Alternative Development's report of 332 fatalities due to gender-based violence in 2022. The case of Luke Jobson. Luke Jobson, a 22-year-old who was on the verge of qualifying as an electrical and mechanical engineer after completing 4 years of study and an apprenticeship. He was a well-liked and talented individual who was known for his athletic abilities, particularly in football. Growing up, Luke attended St. Patrick's Comprehensive and Hawood Primary Schools in Thornaby. He was a talented sportsman, playing football as a center forward for Thornaby Central in his youth. His love of clothes and fashion was evident, and he took great pride in his appearance. According to his dad, Stuart, Luke was a perfectionist who would often check his family members' clothes to ensure they looked their best. Stuart described Luke as a genuine and beautiful person, both inside and out. Luke, a young man from Yarm, attended a nightclub called The Keys on Saturday, January 26, 2019, along with his friends. Yarm is a small town and the Keys is a popular spot on the high street where the town's nightlife is concentrated. Luke failed to return home after his night out at the Keys, and his parents tried to contact him on Sunday morning, but he didn't respond. His friends were also unaware of his whereabouts. Luke's family quickly took to Facebook to appeal for help, and many people joined the search for him. The police investigation began on Sunday, and Cleveland police released a statement expressing concern for Luke's disappearance, as it was out of character for him. They asked the public to share any private CCTV or dashcam footage that might be relevant to the case. Police had learned about a possible altercation involving Luke shortly before his disappearance. According to reports on social media, Luke got into a fight with several people outside the Keys around 2 a.m. The last reported sighting of Luke was near Yarm School at around 2:15 a.m. The police were investigating this information, but their top priority was finding the missing young man. Luke's girlfriend, Danny, made a heartfelt plea on social media, describing her experience as a living nightmare and urging anyone with information to come forward. Luke's cousin, Jake, also reached out on Facebook, asking for help in locating Luke. He was last seen fleeing from a group of young men on Yarm High Street. Friends and family initiated a search for Luke near the River Tees in Yarm on Sunday, which eventually grew into a large-scale operation. By Monday morning, hundreds of concerned individuals gathered at Yarm School's car park eager to contribute despite many not knowing Luke personally. The overwhelming response to the Facebook appeal showcased the community spirit. Cars arrived at the car park, carrying people who were ready to aid in the search. Many others arrived on foot, dressed in warm clothing, prepared to brave the cold weather. Over 300 people participated in the search, which was divided into 18 groups that scoured various areas, including Preston Park, Stokesley, Cottonwood, Early Nook, and Hilton. Specialist police search teams also combed the River Tees banks near Yarm School. A body found in a River Tees has been identified as 22-year-old Luke Jobson, who had been missing. Cleveland police confirmed the news and expressed their condolences to Luke's family and friends. Family members are being supported by specially trained officers during this difficult time. In a tribute, Luke's parents, Lisa Jobson and Stuart Banks, described their son as a popular and ambitious young man who loved working out at the gym. Luke's mother, Lisa, said they are proud of everything he achieved and want to celebrate his life. She added that they want everyone to remember him for the good things he did. The news of Luke's death sparked an outpouring of emotion in the Teesside community. Friends and family members flooded social media with tributes, and a huge crowd gathered in Yarm for a vigil in his memory. Almost 1,000 people attended the event, which included a firework display and a rendition of Angels by Robbie Williams. The community showed their support for Luke's family by leaving ribbons, balloons, and flowers near the scene of his death. As the police investigated Luke's death, they spoke to numerous individuals, including those who were at the nightclub on the night of the incident. They also obtained CCTV footage, which corroborated earlier reports of a confrontation between Luke and several others. The footage shows Luke wearing a gray t-shirt, jeans, and white sneakers. It appears that Luke made a comment to someone, which caused several aggressive-looking individuals to approach him. The situation quickly escalated, and Luke can be seen running away from the group as they chase after him. News of a confrontation being linked to Luke's death emerged soon after he disappeared, as speculation about what had happened spread on social media. Initially, the police only confirmed reports of an altercation prior to his disappearance. They arrested 6 teenagers, aged from 16 to 18, on suspicion of involvement in Luke's death, but later released all of them. The investigation continued, and a new development in the case occurred the following January. Cleveland police announced that 5 people, aged 17 to 20, had been charged with a fray, which involves using or threatening unlawful violence, but not with Luke's death. They were set to appear in court. The 5 individuals charged include a 17-year-old, now 18, who cannot be named due to age restrictions, Edwin Taha, 20, Ryan Alp, 19, Ali Abdul Majid, 19, and Hamada Sif, 18. According to reports, Edwin Taha was the alleged leader of the group. In England and Wales, A person can be charged with a fray if they use or threaten violence towards another person in a way that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety. To understand the events leading up to Luke Jobson's death, we need to consider the following points. Firstly, when two or more people use or threaten violence, their actions are considered collectively. Secondly, for a threat to be valid in this context, it cannot be purely verbal. Looking at the recording, it's clear that Luke was concerned for his safety as he was seen running away. The threats against him were not just verbal. Unfortunately, the exact cause of the conflict remains unclear, as none of the suspects provided a clear answer. Additionally, the whereabouts of Luke's friends, who were with him at the nightclub, are unknown at the time of the quarrel. The police recording does not provide this information. From the footage, it appears that Luke was not planning to leave the club, as he was standing outside in just a t-shirt, with his jacket still inside. The footage shows Luke confronting a group before being forced to run for his safety. Initially, his athletic ability allowed him to overcome his suitors. However, the group, including Taha and other future defendants, returned to the nightclub, got into a car, and caught up with Luke near a school. They sprayed Luke's face with an unknown substance, suspected to be pepper spray, causing him to lose his sight. In an attempt to escape, Luke climbed over a wall into the school grounds, where CCTV cameras captured his entry into a boathouse. Sadly, this was the last time Luke was seen alive. After Taha pepper sprayed Luke's face, the group got back into their car and drove away. It's unclear whether Luke knew where he was going, but given that he didn't attend school there and was disoriented from the tear gas, it's unlikely he understood his surroundings. If this was the case, it's possible he accidentally fell into the water once he entered the boathouse. It's worth noting that these events took place in January, when the water in the river was extremely cold. According to the police, no one else entered the boathouse that night, and Luke never came out. 2 days later, the police found his body in the water near the school, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The suspects initially refused to admit guilt, but during the first court hearing on September 28, 2020, Edwin Taha and Ali Abdul changed their minds and admitted to their involvement in the fight. Autopsy results from pathologists Dr. Nigel Cooper and Dr. Jennifer Bolton revealed that Luke had consumed alcohol before his death. The amount he drank was likely to cause noticeable signs of intoxication in an average person. The police had released Edwin Taha on bail, and none of the suspects were detained before the trial. The investigation found that the victim had traces of a banned substance in his system, which, combined with alcohol, made him more vulnerable to hypothermia. There were no injuries or evidence of assault, and the deceased did not have any underlying medical conditions that contributed to his death. While the autopsy did not show any signs of eye inflammation or evidence of being sprayed with a substance, witness statements confirmed that the deceased, Luke, was pepper sprayed and struggled to walk and see. The perpetrator, Taha, later bragged about the incident on the high street. The coroner concluded that Luke was incapacitated by the pepper spray. The verdict was announced in October 2020. In an emotional statement, Luke's mother, Lisa Jobson, addressed the court as the individuals responsible for her son's death faced justice. Miss Jobson described the gang that had surrounded her son, Luke, before chasing him through Yarm High Street as a pack of wolves. She explained that from the day Luke was born, he had been loved, cared for, and protected. He had been their world and their only son. They had been extremely close to him, and he had been a kind, gentle, and genuine person who had touched the hearts of everyone he had met. Luke had been a loving and caring individual who had lit up a room with his presence. He had had good friends from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and he hadn't had a mean bone in his body. He had been a positive person who always strived to be his best and had always been looking forward to new experiences. Miss Jobson expressed that they would never forget the terror Luke had faced that night, and the fact that none of the gang members had had the courage to take responsibility for their actions was unbearable. Knowing that their faces had been the last ones Luke had seen on this earth was a constant reminder of the pain and suffering he had endured. It was a living hell for them, and they were left to live with the knowledge that their son hadn't been able to escape safely. At the trial, the lawyer for Abdul's co-defendant stated that Abdul was unaware that Taha possessed pepper spray. He claimed that Abdul did not expect the victim to be assaulted with a weapon. Only one person, not Abdul, knew that Taha had a pepper spray. Taha's lawyer revealed that his client had a difficult childhood, which had led to poor decision-making. On the night of the incident, something was said that triggered a chain of events. Taha acknowledges that the outcome should never have happened. Taha's lawyer also shared that his client had moved to the UK from France at age 4 and had been left to live with a foster family after his mother returned to France. The judge emphasized that neither defendant was directly responsible for the victim's death, but noted that the chase had led to the victim entering the school and boathouse, ultimately resulting in drowning. Taha, 20, was sentenced to 21 months in prison after pleading guilty to Afrakis. He also received an additional 4 years and 4 months for charges related to prohibited substances. 19-year-old Abdul, of Corvus Drive in Stockton, has been sentenced to 15 months in prison, suspended for 18 months after admitting his involvement in an incident that led to the death of Luke. Abdul was also ordered to complete 300 hours of unpaid work. According to the court, Abdul was driving the car that pursued Luke on the night of the incident. The court heard that the altercation started on Yarm High Street, where Luke was chased by a group of males in a vehicle. When they caught up with him, he was sprayed in the eyes with a noxious substance, which had a severe effect on him. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson stated that the altercation had a devastating impact on Luke's family, who have been left without their son and brother. She added that the incident has caused immense pain and hardship for the family, and that nothing can bring Luke back. However, now that the case has concluded, the family may find some closure and be able to move forward with their lives. Charges against 2 other individuals, 19-year-old Ryan Alp and 18-year-old Hamada Sith, were dropped. To summarize the case, Chris Atkinson of the Crown Prosecution Service made a statement after the sentencing in October 2020. He stated that although Taha and Abdul were found guilty, the focus remains on Luke Jobson's family, who may find this time particularly challenging. The prosecution successfully proved that both men were involved in an altercation with Luke before his death. However, it is essential to note that there is no evidence to suggest that their actions directly caused the tragic events that followed the attack. The case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father was in the military, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana met Kevin Green when Diana was harassed by several men at a bar. Kevin intervened and chased the men away. In gratitude, Diana bought Kevin a drink. They went on a date a few days later, and their relationship quickly progressed. Kevin was in the process of divorcing his first wife. Kevin and Diana moved in together for a while, and Diana became pregnant. After Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married. While waiting for their daughter to be born, they rented an apartment in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana stayed home to prepare for the baby's arrival, having previously worked with her mother in a garment factory. By late September 1979, Diana was nearly 9 months pregnant. On the evening of September 30th, Kevin and Diana got into an argument after watching a movie together. The impending birth of their daughter had put a strain on their relationship. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby restaurant. About 40 minutes after the incident, Kevin called the local police department to report that his wife, Diana, had been shot and needed immediate medical attention. Police arrived on the scene shortly after receiving the call. When they entered the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed, covered in blood, with a head wound that appeared to be a gunshot wound. However, upon closer examination, paramedics later determined that the wound was actually caused by blunt force trauma. When the police checked on Diana, found her alive and provided first aid until the ambulance arrived, they asked Kevin to leave the room. After the paramedics took over, they carefully transported Diana to the hospital. Meanwhile, the police asked Kevin to stay behind to give a statement. He told police that he and his wife had been arguing, so he decided to leave the apartment to calm down and buy some burgers at a fast food restaurant. In his haste, he realized he had left his keys inside, but chose not to go back to get them. Instead, He locked the door and went to his car. As Kevin drove away from the apartment complex, he noticed a truck with its back door open and an African-American man walking back and forth toward the truck. It was late, around 2 a.m. He drove to the fast food restaurant he frequented, but it was busy, so he went to another location a few miles away. After buying a burger, he drove home, which took 40 minutes. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. He rushed inside and found his wife, Diana, covered in blood. He immediately called the police. Kevin's story had some suspicious signs, but when the police checked the fast food bag, they found the food was still warm and the receipt confirmed the time and place of purchase, supporting Kevin's story. As a result, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but not before asking him to provide a blood sample for further investigation. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts could still compare the blood found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors determined that her head wound was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it was likely inflicted by a small, heavy object. Unfortunately, Diana fell into a coma. The medical team worked diligently for several hours to save both her and her unborn child. After many hours of intense care, they were able to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still required surgery. During the investigation, police asked medical experts to determine whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The experts confirmed that Diana had indeed been sexually assaulted, finding semen on her body. However, Kevin testified that he and Diana had had sex just hours before the argument. Diana and Kevin's family stayed in the hospital all night, and the next morning, the baby's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. Doctors tried, but the baby did not survive. Although Diana remained in a coma, her chances of survival had improved. However, doctors warned that she could suffer long-term effects. Although Kevin had an alibi, police were not quick to clear him due to several inconsistencies in his story. He had an argument with Diana just hours before the attack, left his front door unlocked, and spent much of the time on a quick trip to a fast food restaurant. His claim of seeing a suspicious person near his home at night also raised suspicions. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Kevin to the crime. Police are investigating another suspect in a series of similar crimes in the area. A year earlier, a series of break-ins and assaults had occurred in Tustin and surrounding areas with similar modus operandi. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was killed after being beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. For months later, a 21-year-old woman was murdered and sexually assaulted. In July 1979, a woman was attacked in her apartment but survived, although she was in a coma for several weeks. Her testimony provided no new leads. Prior to Diana's attack, a similar attack occurred in September 1979, when a 34-year-old woman was murdered. A series of crimes occurred, all with striking similarities to the attack on Diana. The police believed they were dealing with a serial killer and focused their efforts on capturing him. To address the growing concern, the police decided to issue a public warning through the media, specifically targeting women living alone and those living in low-rise apartments, who appeared to be the serial killer's favorite targets. The warning caused panic, and in response, the police increased night patrols in the area. The police began by interviewing and soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was somewhat vague, the police were able to identify several men who matched and investigate them. Unfortunately, these leads did not lead to any cases. A week after Diana was attacked, her doctors informed her loved ones that she had finally regained consciousness. However, there was a serious concern. Diana was unable to speak or remember anything. According to her doctors, her brain was still recovering. Around the same time, another attack occurred in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, striking her multiple times with a piece of wood and sexually assaulting her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police were once again unable to catch the perpetrator. Diana spent several days in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. During this time, her mind slowly cleared, but she had lost almost all of her memory. Doctors told her family that her memories might return, but warned them not to remind her of anything, letting her remember on her own. After being stabilized, Diana was discharged from the hospital and her family took her home. Her husband Kevin had to work at the military base, so Diana was sent to live with Diana's parents. 2 weeks later, another attack occurred in the city, similar to the one on Diana. This time, the attacker killed a 17-year-old girl. Diana began attending physical therapy sessions and her condition gradually improved. Although she still could not speak or remember the attack, a breakthrough occurred 6 weeks later during a therapy session. The doctor asked Diana if she could remember who attacked her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly pointed to her wedding ring. The doctor shared this information with Diana's mother when she came to pick her up. Diana's mother asked her daughter if her husband, Kevin, was the one who attacked her, and Diana nodded. Diana's mother immediately took her to the police station to speak with the chief. After asking Diana a few more questions, the police confirmed that she remembered her attacker and identified him as her husband, Kevin. This new information dramatically changed the course of the investigation. Police suspected that Diana's attack was related to a series of similar incidents in the area, committed by a serial offender. However, Kevin matched the suspect's description, leading police to question whether Kevin could be the culprit behind these attacks. The police asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana had not recovered her memory and to return home with Kevin, but they agreed to do so. Meanwhile, the police kept a close watch on Kevin, monitoring his every move in the hope of finding evidence of a crime linked to the serial murders. Crime scene testing revealed evidence under Diana's fingernails, where they found bloody skin particles, in addition to the attacker's semen. After analyzing the evidence, police found a match between the attacker's blood type and Kevin's blood sample, indicating that Kevin was the one who attacked Diana. As for a motive, police suspect that Diana's refusal to have sex with Kevin may have prompted the attack, although Kevin insists that they had sex earlier that night. The police spoke to Diana, and she remembered the attack clearly, confirming that Kevin was her killer. During the conversation, her mother expressed that they could no longer live with Kevin, and the police decided to arrest him. To protect Diana's family, Kevin was arrested at a store instead of at their home. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence. Preparations for the trial lasted 10 months, during which time Diana's health gradually improved. She regained her ability to speak. Diana was cleared of the charges, and her husband was found guilty of assaulting her. Kevin's defense team tried to use his fast food alibi, but it was not enough to disprove Diana's testimony. As a result, Kevin was convicted in November 1980 of the child's murder and assault on Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Police learned that 2 similar crimes had occurred in their district before Kevin was arrested, but both victims survived. Although the identity of the attacker remains unknown, these incidents raised suspicions that Kevin was involved in other crimes. The attack stopped abruptly after Kevin was arrested. After Kevin's sentencing, Diana promptly filed for divorce, which Kevin did not contest. Diana then focused on her recovery. When Kevin became eligible for parole, the committee denied his request, a decision that was repeated 3 more times. The serial killer case remained unsolved until 1996, when police reopened the investigation. Semen samples from the victims, which had been stored in a laboratory, were retested. Police wanted to determine who the culprit was, and DNA analysis yielded a surprising result. Gerald Parker, a man arrested the same year as Kevin, was found to have a DNA match to the serial murders. After the DNA match confirmed Parker's involvement in the serial murders, investigators re-examined the attack on Diana. Parker and Kevin worked together on a military base, and Parker owned a dark-colored van, similar to the one described in the attacks. During his initial police interview, Kevin reported seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck in front of their home on the day of the attack. This information led police to consider the possibility that Parker was involved in the attack on Diana. While Kevin was in jail, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher serial murder investigation. The prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a DNA sample, which he quickly agreed to. While the DNA analysis was underway, police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. Although they had not yet formally charged him with the attacks, they hoped to gather more information. Parker initially denied any involvement in the crimes, so detectives focused their questioning on the attack on Diana. During questioning, Parker revealed that on the night of the incident, he drove his truck to Kevin's house, intending to circle the neighborhood, looking through the ground floor windows for a victim. However, this time, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when Kevin left the house, Parker noticed that the door was unlocked, so he waited a few minutes before entering the apartment and attacking Diana. Parker revealed that he did not know Kevin's wife because they worked in different areas of the military base. He also confessed to committing 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks. After Parker's confessions, DNA evidence confirmed his guilt and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor quickly moved to overturn Kevin's sentence, and he was released from prison after 16 years. The case has caused widespread outrage, not only because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison, but also because it took so long for police to identify the real killer. When Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a relatively small amount. Years later, he received an additional $100 for each day he spent in prison, totaling $620,000 despite Kevin's exoneration. His wife Diana initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had previously claimed that Kevin was her only attacker. However, after DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, she changed her story. Diana reported that Kevin attacked her before leaving the apartment, and then Parker entered and attacked her as well. However, Parker said that when he entered the house, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress. He also admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family proposed an alternative theory, suggesting that Kevin might have conspired with Parker to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was large and many people didn't know each other personally. Parker denied knowing Kevin. Kevin also denied any involvement with Parker, insisting that he would never harm Diana or their unborn daughter. He explained that he left the door open because he didn't want to go back to get the keys after their argument, and he still blames himself for that decision. As for Parker, he was sentenced to death in 1999, but this sentence has yet to be carried out. After years of waiting on death row, California imposed a moratorium on executions, and as a result, Parker remains incarcerated to this day. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell, in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to they noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "He proposed, best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first downs, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute, because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his coworker Cameron Frederickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to self-in and search the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town, as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, "Hello, Jordan. My name is Tony. There is no bother looking for Cody anymore. He is gone." Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. "I was freaking out, asking what was going on. I read the email and it said Cody was gone. Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police and she did. But I was rushing her, saying, 'Go, move, what are you doing?'" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing, and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was strangely chipper during the entire drive to the park, waving her hand out the window as they went. Despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. "I think he's down there," she said, leaving Clark wondering why on earth Cody would be in that location. "It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all." The auto revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stallcup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address Carmen Tony 67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over 52 years old. Kelly Clayton had everything going for her. First of all, she was quite smart and bright since high school. She was a role model for other students, active in school, excelled in tests, and passed exams just as well. At the same time, outwardly, she never looked like a girl who spent days and nights sitting over textbooks, cramming lessons, and writing out something from additional literature. No, On the contrary, her looks were considered model-like. And if her grades had left much to be desired, she could have built a modeling career. She could have, but she didn't. After high school, she went to teacher training university to become a chemistry teacher. The insane pride of her parents, but only for the first few years of university. It is not known what turning point happened to her then. But one day, Kelly took her documents from the institution and, calling her parents, said that she no longer wanted to study, that she was too young to spend the rest of her life checking notebooks and raising ungrateful children. If she wants to, she will definitely return to her educational endeavors. In the meantime, she wants to travel and live life to her heart's content. Not the best idea, according to her parents, who were so upset that they didn't communicate with their daughter for 6 months. But perhaps if it wasn't for this desperate act, Kelly would never have met Tom Clayton. They met at a party of mutual friends, and the young man really liked the girl. Firstly, he, from the first minutes of acquaintance, began to court Kelly and show signs of attention. And secondly, Tom had a beautiful appearance and athletic physique, and all because the guy was a hockey star. For 4 consecutive seasons, he played for the semi-professional team Jackals. And in it, he was considered a strong man, a player who was able to break the opponent's ribs only if he did not approach the gate. But only a sports career, and especially built on strength and aggression, will someday fail, and Tom had to put the stick in the far corner and enjoy hockey only from the stands or from the couch watching his favorite team on the TV screen. The couple had to move on with their lives, and first they returned to New York where they got married, then moved to North Carolina, and then moved to the tiny town of Cato, numbering only a few thousand people. There, Tom franchised a company to rebuild houses after fires or disasters and worked in a related profession for a friend's company. As for Kelly, after dropping out of university, she worked as a waitress, only changing places, and now she had 2 children. However, Tom was earning well enough, and Kelly could quit her job at any time and take care of her beautiful daughters. But she still believed that extra money would never be superfluous. Besides, she could use it to blue toys for her children and spoil them in every possible way. On September 28, 2015, Tom, as usual, went to play poker with his friends, the Millers. He never took his wife to such events. Playing for money implied certain skills and experience in the game. Besides, someone had to stay at home with the children, and a family trip would have turned such gatherings into a noisy buffoonery and would not have brought any pleasure from gambling. That evening, Tom was not lucky in the game, but he did not get up from the table, but on the contrary tried to win back and offered anyone who wanted to stay to play until morning, but no one supported him and he went home. At home, however, a terrible picture opened before him. His beloved wife was lying in her own pool of blood, badly beaten and, at first glance, was not breathing. Tom panicked and ran through the rooms looking for his children, and luckily, they were fine but very frightened. He grabbed his daughters and headed to his neighbor Derek's house, trying to make sure the children didn't see their mother's mutilated body. And already from the neighbor's house, he dialed the police number. The officer who arrived on the scene found Tom sitting on his knees in front of his wife's body, trying to give her artificial respiration. Only the EMTs were able to pull the man away, who voiced the terrible and unpleasant information. Kelly had been dead for a long time, and neither they nor he could do anything to help her. All 2 floors of the house were drenched in blood. A major mess was in the bedroom. Apparently, there had been a struggle between Kelly and the perpetrator who had committed his atrocity, despite the fact that there were children in the house at the time. Kelly was pushed down the stairs, evidenced by the knocked-down banister, and beaten on the head with a blunt object until they were sure she was dead. There were no hints of knife or gunshot wounds. The policeman who filmed the crime scene noted to himself that Tom was shocked by what had happened and seemed lost in space. He walked from one corner of the room to another, entered the room for a split second, and immediately left it. And he could not tell the policeman where the children's room was, or where the emergency exit from the house was. But when asked where Tom himself was at the time of the murder, he answered calmly that he had been at a friend's house all evening where they were playing poker. Then the policeman, who did not get any clear information from Tom, went to the neighbors to ask some questions of the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, referred to the perpetrator as a robber. According to the words of the eldest daughter, She and her sister were almost asleep, but they heard their mother start screaming loudly from the next room, "Charlie, run. Run away from here." And then the whole place shook like an earthquake. The girls, after listening to their mother, cautiously went out of their room, but saw the criminal leaning over their mother and beating her with what appeared to them to be a hammer. The girls ran back into the nursery, closed the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. It was a good thing. The criminal wasn't looking for them because that nightstand, as the policeman pointed out, was so small that it would hardly have apprehended a burglar. Say, what did this burglar look like? Well, he was a big one like a bear. That big? Wow. What was he wearing? Blue jeans and a black shirt. He was also wearing a mask, like the one Daddy wears when he goes hunting with Mr. Bourne to shoot ducks. So your daddy has a mask like that too. Will you show me? I'd have to ask him where it is. I don't know. What else did you notice when you saw the robber? He had eyes like Dad's, and I don't remember anything else. I saw him literally just a little bit, got scared, and we quickly ran back inside. Police officers checking the house were unable to confirm the girl's account that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at either the front or back door. Although, on the other hand, the gate to the garage was open, and the perpetrator could have entered the house through the garage. Another thing that the police noted is that nothing was stolen from the house. Jewelry was left untouched lying in a jewelry box, and the safe where Tom kept the cash was not even touched. The doors of the cabinets in the house were also all closed. Usually, burglars check every little cabinet, every shelf, but here the whole mess was the aftermath of a fight. Experienced officers, it would seem, understood everything at once. Tom pretends to be a heartbroken husband, and it was he who killed his beloved wife and the mother of his children in order to further receive insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured and husbands' murderers developing a crime plan always ensure the life of their wives, then in case of her death, he could get up to $1 million. All that's needed is to gather evidence and the case will be solved, especially since even her own daughter said that the mask on the robber was like her father's and eyes like her father. However, the police did not find the hunting mask in the house. After finding out where Tom had spent his time that night, the police questioned the other poker players. Is Tom the killer? Do you really suspect him? Wondered one of his friends. That poor guy had his wife murdered for crying out loud. And instead of looking for the bastard, you want to pin everything on him? How could you think of such a thing? No, Tom certainly couldn't have done it. I've known him a long time, replied another less emotional friend. He worked 2 jobs around the clock because he loved both Kelly and his kids. There's just no way that could happen. Plus, he was with us all night. We played poker, and even when everyone was tired, he kept insisting on continuing to play. Tom really was suspicious that evening, said his acquaintance Laura. During a break in the game, he took me into the next room and asked me to give him my phone to call his wife. He supposedly forgot his phone in the car and didn't want to go get it. I was first surprised that the car was 10 meters away from the house. Go to it and get the phone, but still gave him a call. He stepped back to make the call outside. I didn't hear who or what he was talking to, but when I decided to check the outgoing calls, there were no numbers in the call history, so he just deleted the call. Wouldn't you agree that's odd? I told my husband about it, and he was as surprised as I was. My husband was sitting at the playing table next to Tom and noticed that Tom was not watching the process of dealing cards or watching the people around him, which is very important in poker, but was sitting with his head bowed over the surface of the table where the cards were hiding the screen of his phone. He had his phone on him. Why had he tricked me then? Where was he calling? Who couldn't he call from his phone? After Laura's testimony, the police once again questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and the girl repeated what she had told the policeman the first time. The robber looked a lot like her father. The next testimony was given by the niece of the murdered already after Tom was behind bars. I didn't tell Aunt Kelly. I just didn't want to upset her. She was very fond of Tom. She literally loved him. And besides, she has 2 children by him. They are my sisters. Who needs my truth? Tom was not the man he appeared to be at first glance. Yes, he occasionally spoiled my aunt with attention and flowers. He could easily babysit, which other fathers rarely do. But that was all at home. And at work, he was a completely different person. Decided to help me one day and arranged for Tom to take me to work for him. She was too young to be on her own, so she understood me as well as anyone and wanted the best for me. I worked for Tom all last summer doing correspondence registration and document management. I didn't know him well before that, so at first we had a strictly working relationship. Then he got drunk somewhere and came to the office in that state. There was no one there but me and him. And for some reason, he started to tell me that his family was fictitious. He loves his daughters very much, but he doesn't care about his wife, and he hasn't had any feelings for her for a long time. He's even had a few affairs on the side during their marriage and even considered leaving Aunt Kelly. But he didn't simply because he was afraid that a divorce might leave him without a house and without money. Looking ahead, it is important to note that some of the interviewed female participants of that evening's poker game confirmed the words of Kelly's niece that Tom was not such a faithful husband and had a sexual relationship with two women who were also playing poker that night. In addition to the information about Tom's promiscuous life, Kelly's 16-year-old niece also told about another employee of Tom's firm, Michael Beard. Michael was doing repair work on houses after the fire, and he was doing a good job. But there was one moment in those houses where Bird worked, constantly missing things, and if the first few times Tom did not believe his customers, referring to the fact that during the fire the owners could lose something. Then when the accusations of theft began to be repeated for the third and fourth time, there was no doubt. Michael Bird not only restores the floor and walls, but also steals. Plus, in addition to stealing, there were complaints that Michael was allowing himself to come to work drunk. I was in the office when Michael's stealing came to light. Tom could yell at his employee and kick him out on the street. He was upset with his subordinate's behavior like that. He kept asking him, "How could you?" Or, incident, Tom fired Bird, but still called companies he knew and offered them to hire his former employee. Tom recommended Michael, and when all his options were exhausted, Tom took Bird in to help with the household, cutting the grass, watering the plants, doing minor repairs around the house. The detective called Michael Beard in for questioning. He said he only stole because he and his family needed the money. Tom was very good to me, defended me to the end, but I know it was my own fault. He has a very good wife. She fed me when I worked for them, even though she really shouldn't have. She also gave my children clothes that her daughters had grown out of. I am very grateful for all they have done for me. I feel so bad for Kelly. When I heard about her death, I couldn't believe my ears. I felt so bad. I even went to church and prayed for her to go to the best of all worlds. The police did not find anything strange in Michael's story and let him go. But the interrogation of his wife, Mrs. Bird, made the police doubt his words. According to his wife, Holly, Tom offered Michael some work, which he did not say. And for this work, he promised to pay him $10,000. Now that was interesting. Michael was called back to the station and had a lie detector hooked up to him. All questions were failed. Bird was lying and therefore failed the test. Realizing he couldn't get away with it, he began to testify. Indeed, Tom promised Bird $10,000 if Michael, on the day when Tom will play poker, sneak into his house, kill his wife, and set a fire in his house. The plan was to strangle Kelly and then make it look like she just burned to death in an accidental fire. Plus, the family home was insured for a very large sum of money. As the police checked, it was true. Kelly's home and life were insured at the highest rate. 2 cans of gasoline were waiting for Michael in the garage through which the house was to be entered. Everything was fine here. Bird entered the house when everyone was already asleep. He quietly began to climb the stairs and reach the bedroom where Kelly was supposed to be sleeping. But the young woman was either awake or awakened by the sound of the open door. And when she saw a strange man in the doorway, she began to scream in fright. Michael was just as frightened and pounced it on Kelly, trying to close his huge hands around her neck. But it wasn't that easy. Kelly began to fight back. I had no idea that a seemingly fragile Kelly had so much strength in her, says Michael. A heck of a fight ensued, which spilled over from the second-floor bedroom to the first-floor kitchen. Michael, because of the shock and panic, could not concentrate on the fight, but only waved his arms in all directions or just grabbed Kelly's clothes while Kelly, defending her life, aimed very accurately at Michael's face. And if the police had come to Bird earlier, they would have seen the marks from the beatings on him. But everything turned out as it did. After a long struggle, Michael hit Kelly's head against the wall with all his might. She fell, and for a while couldn't find the strength to get up. Michael took out a hammer and began hitting the young woman's head with it until she stopped showing signs of life. Michael, maddened by what had happened, just ran out of the house, even forgetting that Tom asked him not only to kill Kelly, but also to set the house on fire to cover up the crime. Michael had an accomplice, Mark Blandford, who, in fact, served only as a driver. The day before it happened, I got a call from Michael. I had worked with him on a construction site for a long time, and I had stayed with him for a couple weeks last year, so I knew him well. I knew Michael was into petty theft, so when he called me and asked me to drive while he broke into someone's house, I wasn't surprised. I wanted to turn him down, but he offered me $500. I thought long and hard at first, but he talked me into it. He said he just wanted to rob a businessman, and he needed help to get out of there before the cops got there. He said he'd help with the car. I gave in to his entreaties, but on the condition that I park somewhere far away from the house, he agreed. That evening, I waited for him in that car in a dark alley, and he came back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling me to move as fast as possible. He didn't have any bag or sack on him, which didn't look much like a robbery. I didn't ask him any questions along the way, simply because I didn't want to know anything. I just wanted my $500, which, by the way, I didn't end up getting. On the way out, he asked me to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of here. I stopped there. He hastily stripped off his outer garments and threw them off the bridge. If you need to be shown the place, I'll show you. Indeed, police officers who arrived on the scene at Mark's behest found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. There was no question of murder. When he went into the house, however, Kelly was already dead. And who killed her? The detective asked. I think it was Tom. He offered me money for murder and arson from the beginning, but I refused the first offer. I'm not willing to kill a man for any money. He said I had nothing to fear, but he never could talk me into it. You may not believe me, but I almost lost my mind when I saw Kelly's body. I knew right then and there that he was setting me up, so I ran out of the house. He's the killer, Michael insisted. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Bird had thrown out his things and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. In turn, Tom also did not admit that it was he who ordered the massacre of his wife from a former problem employee of his company. According to him, Michael knew that he had money, knew that he was not poor, and because Bird lost his job as well as because of resentment associated with the dismissal, he decided to rob his house. But Kelly was at home that night, for which he paid with his life. It might have been difficult to prove Tom's guilt and his conspiracy with Michael if Laura, the woman who had been playing poker that night, had not told the police that Tom had called from her cell phone. The detective requested a transcript of her calls and expectations were confirmed. Then, on the night of September 28, 1929, Tom Clayton called Michael Beard. Michael was the first to go to trial. He continued to insist that he had been hired to set fire to the house in order to collect the insurance payout. He didn't kill Kelly, and as for the blood on his clothes, it was just because he was touching a dead and mutilated body. That's why he got dirty. He'd thrown his stuff away so no one would think he'd been at Clayton's house that night. His speech sounded convincing. The jury had been deliberating for 7 hours. In the end, they concluded that Michael Beard was guilty on all counts. He was facing life in prison. As for Tom, his lawyers were able to obtain records of conversations and correspondence between him and Michael, and none of the conversations clearly discussed their devious plan. The prosecution's requests for billing transcripts of his movements yielded no concrete results either. All the evidence was circumstantial. If it weren't for one nuance, The car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company. And Tom, coming to the office on his personal Toyota, left it in the parking lot, where for some reason moved to the company pickup truck, which later drove to Michael's house and left there and took back the day after the tragedy. That is, in fact, he gave Michael the car on which he and Mark went to the crime. It was this fact that was testified to at the trial by the jury. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jury concluded that Tom had hired Michael to commit this horrible crime after all. Michael in turn filed an appeal. In his defense, he used the words of little Charlie, who said that the eyes in the slit of the mask belonged to her father. However, the court rejected the appeal because the description of the clothes matched the one found under the bridge. As a result, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard received life sentences. As for Mark, he was charged with manslaughter, for which he received 4 years in prison. Tom and Kelly's children were given custody to Kelly's sister, Kim. After some time, Charlie has moved on from the tragedy. She occasionally remembers her mom, but absolutely won't talk about her father, who she will never see again. Shadrach Tyrion was born on September 7, 1997 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His parents were Tara Pinich and Michael Tyrion. Following his parents' separation, Tara started dating a man named Steve. Shad's family consisted of his parents, 2 sisters named Ava Weig and Svea Sooner Tyrion, and a brother named Bo Smith. During his childhood, Shad attended Howard and SWO schools before eventually joining the family business with his father and grandfather. Shad was a lively person who loved camping, gaming, and spending time with his family. He had a talent for wood carving and was recognized for his kindness and compassion, always putting others' needs first. His tragic end is particularly poignant considering his empathetic nature and tight-knit family. On February 23, 2022, as night fell, Shad told his family he was going out to meet 2 friends. His parents bid him goodbye around 9:30 p.m. Unbeknownst to them, danger awaited. Later that night, Shad's mother Tara returned, went to bed, unaware that Shad had already come home with Taylor and was in the basement. Early in the morning, Tara woke up to the sound of the front door closing as Taylor left. Worried, she went downstairs, called for her son, and, getting no response, decided to check the basement. Inside, she found a bucket covered with a rag. Removing it, she made a horrifying discovery: her son's head was inside. Shocked, she called police immediately. Upon deeper investigation, authorities found Shad's body parts in a bucket. Detectives checked Shad's phone records and discovered that on February 23rd, he had planned to meet 2 people, Taylor Schabuisnes and Alexander Gainan. Taylor had picked up Shad to hang out at her place. After receiving a statement from Shad's mother, Tara, the police questioned Taylor Schabuisnes and Alexander Gainan at their homes. Taylor resided in a house owned by her friend, Scott Thomas, which they shared. Bloody footprints near Taylor's minivan at her place led the detectives to her apartment, where they decided to question Taylor further. Taylor complained about the dirty environment on camera, showing her indifference towards her actions towards Shad. The detective then asked her about her relationship with Shad, to which Taylor revealed he was her ex-boyfriend. She admitted to meeting Shad on February 23rd in her apartment, where Scott was also present. Scott was there when the police came to arrest Taylor, and she mentioned that the minivan belonged to Scott. Taylor was questioned about the activities of the 3 friends that night herself, Shad and Alexander Gainan. She readily admitted to smoking marijuana together. She said that she was giving Shad a haircut while the 3 of them smoked. But after some time, Alexander Gainan decided to go home, saying it was late. After Alexander Gainan left, Taylor and Shad decided to go to Shad's house, where he told her that his mother were going to be arriving home late. They went to Shad's house and consumed crystal methamphetamine. She also confessed to stealing trazodone from her friend Scott's drawer, and they both injected it using a needle. Taylor's admission of using drugs that night suggested that she might have a history of substance abuse, which added another complex layer to this case. The detective recognized that Taylor was under the influence of drugs during the questioning, but continued with the interrogation without hesitation. Taylor confessed to detective that Shad's remains were still in the basement. The detective further pressed her, asking for details about what exactly happened to Shad. But Taylor replied that she had blacked out after drinking and smoking for some time. This time, even though Taylor tried to find a way out by attempting to lie, she quickly realized that her tactics weren't working and she had no other option except to confess. Later in the interview, Taylor admitted that she and Shad had been intimate that night and there were also toys and other props involved, including a choke collar. As the interrogation continued, detective questioned her about the chains and other toys that they had found at the scene. Taylor admitted that she loved to strangle Shad, and he enjoyed it too. This reveals her sadistic and violent tendencies. When the detective continued asking Taylor where the other body parts were, she displayed a slight sense of regret for not bringing Shad's head with her. However, Taylor was not remorseful for her actions. Instead, she was dejected because of the mistake she'd made in leaving Shad's head in his basement, which eventually led the police to her. She provided clear answers to the detective, stating that some of Shad's body parts were inside the van while the others remained in the basement. Her lack of remorse after committing such a heinous crime was startling. This might stem from a disturbed psyche or a potential mental health condition that hinders her ability to experience any emotions related to this atrocious crime. Another possibility is that she may have been under the influence of drugs, which could have prompted her to act on intrusive thoughts. However, the detectives were yet to uncover the whole truth. During the interrogation, she giggled often and laughed while giving details about the events of that night. Detective asked her that, "Remember what happened with Shad?" She said that here comes the chain, and then he put it around his neck while they were playing around, and this shows again that Taylor did not understand how serious her actions were when she brutally dismembered her ex-partner. The detective saw Taylor's brutal and sadistic side when she said that she loved watching Shad's internal organs as she dismembered him with kitchen knives. She also added, in an almost casual tone, that she got lazy that night and didn't bother dismembering and moving all the body parts to her apartment. Taylor's casual behavior and detachment from the crime she just committed made the detective question whether she had intended for Shad to die from the beginning. When questioned about this, Taylor answered no, but there was no hint of remorse or repentance in her voice. She continued to describe the events of the night as if she were having a casual conversation, which slowly started to suggest that she may be dealing with mental health issues. Taylor confessed to strangling Shad with chains, finding pleasure in the act, and continuing even after Shad's death. She claimed an irresistible urge to kill those she loved too much, proving her awareness of Shad's murder. Taylor also admitted to engaging in sexual acts with Shad's corpse displaying necrophiliac tendencies. Taylor expressed regret for not taking any drugs after the process, as she knew it would have helped her calm down. She admitted to feeling frustrated while dismembering Shad and cleaning up the mess, but she said she enjoyed the process. After confessing to the crime, Taylor briefly diverted the conversation by saying she messed up and didn't intend for those things to happen. However, while reenacting the scene of her strangling Shad that night, she was observed laughing without any hint of guilt or remorse in her voice, a clear indication of a person with a distorted psychological state. When the detective asked why Taylor didn't call for the police or an ambulance, she genuinely felt remorseful for her actions. Taylor did admit that she had considered it, but she was experiencing irrational thoughts after the murder. During another interrogation, the detective asked Taylor how she dismembered Shad's body, and Taylor proceeded to provide a vivid description of the gruesome act that took place that night. Her description of the details was more akin to reliving those moments to experience the thrill again. Taylor Denise Coronado, born in Evan, Illinois in November 1997 to parents Maria and Arturo Coronado, moved to Wisconsin with her family when she was in the 4th grade. Later in life, she married Warren Shabuzans, who was incarcerated at the time of the incident. They had a 2-year-old son named Maddow. Despite this, Taylor engaged in sexual activities with her ex-partner, Shad Tyrion, after committing a gruesome crime. The police were aware that Taylor had significant mental health issues and desperately needed psychological assistance. They were certain that she was fully aware of her actions when she committed the crime, as she admitted multiple times that she enjoyed the act of dismembering Shad's body. Taylor also confessed to playing with the deceased Shad using various toys, as well as performing oral acts on him. This deeply disturbed not only the investigators, but also the people around the world who began to question the lack of humanity in individuals like Taylor Shibusins. Taylor was arrested on February 23, 2022, for murdering and dismembering her ex-lover, Shad Tyrion. On July 24, 2022, the trial of Taylor Shabs began. Considering the gravity of the crime, the court had to determine if Taylor was sane during the time of the crime and if she knew her actions were wrong. During the trial, Taylor's grandmother testified that Taylor had a very difficult childhood. She lost her mother at an early age and her father remarried. Taylor also lost her brother Arturo Coronado Jr. in a motorcycle accident in 2021. Her husband Warren Shabusnis, who also defended her in court, was already in prison for illegally distributing meth. Taylor's grandmother added that 24 hours after Taylor's son was born, he was taken away by Child Protective Services, but she and her husband were fighting for custody of their grandson Mato. Growing up in such a toxic environment, Taylor had dealt with depression and bipolar disorder. The grandmother stated that Taylor needed psychological help and another chance to live her life. When Taylor's 51-year-old father, Arturo Coronado, came to give his testimony, he too had to be transported from prison, where he was serving a sentence for second-degree assault of a child. His testimony revealed that Taylor had some issues during her high school years. As a way to address these issues, her father sent her to live with her grandparents in Texas, where she eventually graduated. He also stated that shortly before Mata was born, Taylor was admitted to the Nicolette Psychiatric Center due to hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. The father added that Taylor was doing relatively well until her husband came into the picture and got her addicted to drugs. Similarly, when Taylor and Shad's mutual friend Alexander Gainan came to testify, Taylor continued to giggle and laugh throughout his testimony. Alexander confirmed that he had known Taylor and Shad since they attended Bellevue Middle School together and that the two were dating back then. He also provided his account of the day of the murder, stating that he was with them at Taylor's apartment, drinking, and left around 1 or 2 a.m. as it was getting late. Alexander further mentioned that he had tried to contact Shad the next day, but received no response. Taylor was seen wearing a spit guard, usually used for those attempting to spit on officers or court personnel during his next court appearance. Taylor's second cousin Valerie and some of his more distant relatives showed up to testify that while Taylor needed psychological treatment at the moment, he should be given another chance in the future. Shad's uncle, Kelly Tyrion, made a rather emotional statement. He emphasized the point that everyone goes through tough times in their lives, but that's no excuse for murdering someone so brutally, and her mental health issues shouldn't be a reason for the possibility of parole. When it was Shad's father, Michael Tyrion's turn, he made a surprising statement by forgiving Taylor for his actions. Michael expressed his forgiveness towards Taylor, acknowledging that he had made a regrettable decision that he now had to live with. He also shared fond memories of Shad, describing him as a kind and happy child. Despite the gravity of Taylor's actions, Michael extended forgiveness and expressed hope for Taylor's future. He mentioned the possibility of requesting the judge to consider allowing Taylor to re-enter society at some point, emphasizing that everyone makes mistakes and has the potential to change for the better. Michael chose not to harbor hatred towards Taylor, recognizing his humanity and wishing him well. Finally, the assistant district attorney, Caleb Saunders, concluded that what Taylor did to Shad was not due to substance abuse or mental health issues. She simply committed the crime because she enjoyed it. He added that Taylor's lack of remorse should earn her the highest possible sentence for this terrible crime. The defense attorney, Christopher Frolick, said that Taylor was not a lost cause or a monster, and despite having committed this irreversible and horrible crime, she should be given a second chance. He also classified the entire murder as an honest mistake. However, when he asked for a possible extension of the trial, the outburst displayed by Taylor in the court provided a clear indication to everyone that she was not merely a victim of substance abuse, but rather someone who was dealing with significant issues that required immediate attention. The trial concluded on September 26, 2022, where Judge Thomas Walsh sentenced Taylor Shabs to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This case shocked the entire world, as people were bewildered by how inhumanely Taylor had dismembered her former lover, Shad Tyrion. What's even more shocking was that the person showed no remorse or guilt for the horrible crime they committed. This raised questions about the state of humanity and society in the current time. Shad's family and friends came together to pray for his soul and spoke about how they'll never be able to heal from this tragic incident. It was also shocking that even after knowing the gravity of the crime committed by Taylor, her family was ready to defend her and blame her upbringing for the crime that she committed. Today's case was truly a disturbing one. It makes one question the lack of humanity and empathy in people like Taylor, who can easily dismember a person that once trusted her. It also highlights that strained family relationships and lack of parental guidance in a child's life when they're growing up can indeed create a monster like Taylor Schaub's. Corpus Christi resident Kevin Davis strangled his mother before hitting her in the head with a hammer, splitting her skull. Davis then swirled her brain around before sexually assaulting her corpse. Davis was sentenced to life in prison for the crime of a mom who he described as the best. In February 2014, Kevin Jazreel Davis argued with his mother, 50-year-old Kimberly Hill, in the Corpus Christi, Texas, apartment he shared with her and his sister, Destiny. On May 26th, Davis called 911 reporting that he'd just murdered his mother. Once at the police station, an 18-year-old Davis vividly detailed the day's events, sometimes with a smirk on his face. What he told detectives was gruesome and shocking. Kevin admitted bashing in Hill's head with a hammer, swirling her brain around, and then sexually assaulting her corpse. On the morning of March 27, 2014, Davis, bored and frustrated with life, told his mother he did not like people and that he wanted to commit suicide. Obviously caught off guard by the statement, Hill allegedly told her son that she could not stop him, that was what he wanted to do. Kevin later told police hearing this from his mother enraged him. It was then he decided to take her life. As Hill sat on the couch in the living room, Davis came up behind her attempting to strangle her with a cord. Hill began screaming. Kevin panicked, retrieved a hammer, and began bashing in his mother's skull. Davis struck his mother in the head with the hammer at least 20 times, splitting her skull in the process. Davis then retrieved a kitchen knife that he inserted inside his mother's head wound. He swirled her brain around to make sure she was dead, Kevin claimed, and then inserted his hand inside the wound. He would tell detectives during a taped interrogation that his mother's brain felt like putty. Kevin then dragged his mother's lifeless body to her bedroom and raped her corpse. When he finished the sadistic act, he went to a neighbor's house saying he just killed someone and needed help. The neighbor dialed 911. Police arrested Davis without incident. At the police station, he made a full confession of the crime, giving details that even seasoned detectives found highly disturbing. Watch part of Kevin Davis's confession. During the interrogation, Davis told detectives that he originally planned on killing his sister too, but changed his mind. He further admitted that he often fantasized about having sex with dead bodies. With a smirk on his face, Kevin also told the detective that he was a virgin before he raped his mother. He stated, "I guess I've lost my virginity to a corpse," as he gently laughed. What did Kimberly Hill do to warrant such a violent death? Nothing warrants a son murdering then sexually assaulting his mother, of course, and Kevin could not give detectives one good reason for the crime. According to Kevin, she was a great mom that did not deserve what he had done to her. He said that she was the best mother in the world and went on to say, "I am a terrible, disgusting person." Kevin admitted that he had the best mother in the world, telling detectives that she did nothing to deserve what was done to her. He went on to say that he was a terrible, disgusting person. In reality, Kevin was a serial teller in the making, a psychopath who took sadistic pleasure in hurting other people. Although diagnosed by a psychologist with antisocial personality disorder, the doctor said he knew right from home when he brutally murdered and raped his mother. He readily admitted that he would tell again if ever released from prison. He also confessed to then fleeing the crime scene on his bicycle. Before he did that, though, he left several handwritten notes for the police, one of which read, "Chase me. Sorry for the mess. KD." But after a while, he decided against leaving town and called 911 to report his mother's killing and his crimes. Despite admitting to the murder and making a videotape confession, Kevin Davis pleaded not guilty to the charges in court. He later changed the plea. Davis smiled at the jury as they sentenced him to life in prison. He serves his time at the Jester 4 facility in Richmond, Texas, and is eligible for parole in March 2044. Story number 2, Story of the Killer Priest. We will be exploring the story of a killer, a priest that seemed to be normal, nothing strange or nothing weird about him. However, he did have a dark side. It turns out that not only was he a pervert, but he was manipulating people as he saw fit, especially women. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the story of Gore. We're going back in time in the 50s in France. And we need to take note that the church at that time had a very important place in people's lives. Especially in the countryside, the priests were almost as important as the mayors because they were representing a type of moral authority that many people listened to. And this was the case in the small village of Europe where this story took place. A town that had about 400 villagers, Gore was born on the countryside, and his family was very Catholic. They raised him so that he can have a career in religion as a priest. And even if that was not his first choice, that is exactly what he became. It is in 1950 that Guy became a priest at the Church of Europe. In appearance, this young man looked like the ideal priest. He was nice, friendly, kind, and very dynamic. Anything linked to religion, he did it very, very well. He had a lot of great ideas to help the village grow. He created a choir, a group to play in a theater piece. He did organize multiple excursions for the kids, and he was known to have created a soccer team for the boys of the village. The older people thought that it was very modern for him to bring all these items to the village, and the younger generation thought it was pretty amazing and appreciated the modern aspect that he brought to the town and to the religion. Dewar was apparently also a beautiful man, and the ladies found him very charming. Now, as I have mentioned at the beginning, underneath this whole angelic disguise Guy was actually hiding a dark secret. His personality, he had a thirst for coelel pleasure, and he was using his charm to get closer to the ladies. After a lot of perversity and manipulation, a lot of the women actually gave in, and none of the women spoke as they were afraid that no one would believe them and did not want to be seen as the shame of the village. It is in 1953 that things took a different turn for Guy Dyer, and an incident happened that changed the plan of the priest. A girl fell for his charm, and guess what happened? She became pregnant. Now, of course, the priest denies everything, and he says that he is not the father. He threatens the girl and says that if she does not stop, he will file a complaint for defamation. Now, having a high influence in the village, Guy says that this is nonsense and it is impossible for him to be the father and, of course, having such an high influence. His followers believed him. He was even summoned in front of his superior, the bishop, to which he lied to you and denied the whole thing. And, of course, this whole situation was shut down in reality. He was actually the father, and he actually took the girl to another village to give birth where he convinced her to give away the child. And of course, that story was never heard of or told to the villagers, or we could say maybe presume that if people knew, they decided not to say anything because the priests had such a high influence on the villagers that they did not want to go against him once the story died. Guy went back to his normal ways and kept manipulating the people like he did before. But there was another incident in 1956. Reen Faye, 19 years of age, got pregnant, and again by Guy Dyer. Contrary to the other women, Reen did not want to give away her child for adoption. Not only that, but she wanted to raise him in the village of the Euruf, where the priest was Guy was terrified, and he was afraid that eventually the child would grow up and resemble him. He was also afraid that this woman would actually speak. Eventually, speaking of which, in 1956, rumors started to make surface. A lot of parishioners were becoming pregnant in mysterious ways, and no one knew who the father was. The priest then starts to think about a plan and ask a military man from another village to come to town and pretend that he was the father. Unfortunately, that strategy did not work out, and no one believed the soldier was the father. That only made things worse for the mysterious pregnancies. December 3rd, 1956 is a date that changed everything for the priest. Kai brings Rain in on a deserted road to try and convince her one more time to give up the child. She refuses again, and she was tired of the priest's request. So you know what she did. She got out of the car and started to walk back the opposite way back to the village. At night, Guy Dyer got out of the car and pulled out a 6.35 caliber pistol and fired 3 shots. The 3 shot hit Regine in the back of the neck, and she died on the spot. Once the crime committed, the priest walked to the victim, entrust her, and took out a knife and started to open Regine's stomach. From her stomach, he removed the baby girl that was still alive. The priest remitted again, an act that cannot be forgiven. He strangled the baby, stabbed it, disfigured it, and he did all the thinking to himself that, if the baby is massacred that way, there would be no DNA, if you want to call it that way, no DNA to trace the baby back to him. The disappearance of Regine was actually reported in the evening, and the weird part is that the priest joined the search party to find the Regine. Can you imagine that situation? I mean, the killer is with you in the search party trying to find the person that he just murdered. Is it just me, or that is just like twisted? The body was found very quickly. And because the priest was not an assassin, he didn't, think about cleaning up the crime scene, so it didn't take long for the cops to find the murder weapon, and they found the weapon casing that linked back to the priest. So the priest is now a suspect, and when asked during the interrogation, the priest denied everything. However, because of all the pressure he was getting, he just cracked and admitted everything. Now that story came out and everyone was devastated in France because he is now a criminal, and the church asked for Guy to be locked up with a false name so that it would not affect the church, and also the main reason was to make sure that the crime was not associated to the church. The court addressed the case of Guy Denoir on January 24, 1958. Of course, the villagers and the public opinion wanted the priest to be sentenced to death. The life of Guy was defined as a person that did enjoy luxury, sexual relations, and admired his own authority. And on his side, the priest was asking forgiveness because he had no clue what he did wrong. The jury did provide their verdict, and for most, they said that he was guilty of double murder. Of course, there was Regine and the baby. However, they did not want to sentence him to death. The jury did not want to send someone associated to the church to the scaffold. The priest Guy Denoir was therefore sentenced to perpetrated work. Now that situation raised a lot of questions regarding the responsibility of the Catholic Church, and this is still a question that is being asked nowadays, especially for the priests who like other kids, if you know what I mean. There was an investigation that was done, and the report came out saying that the church knew the dark side that he was hiding before he was pronounced priest. His superiors noticed that he did not have a lot of faith, and he was not really a believer in Catholic religion. The investigation did show that before being priest in Europe, he was sent to Blemet. While he was there, he did have a sexual relation with his parishioner, and instead of removing his status, they just transferred him to another city. Even there, his weakness for women did not stop, as he did have multiple sexual relations. You would think that the church would revoke his status, but instead he was just transferred to Europe, where the church was isolated and his temptations might be lower. But as we have seen, this was not the case. Denoir was released in 1972 after being detained for 22 years. He was the oldest prisoner of France. Once again, the church came to his help after he was released from prison. He was welcome in a monastery in Brittany, or he stayed there until he died on April 21, 2010 at 90 years of age. Now we go to story number 3. Family slaughtered at Wells Great Provincial Park. The killer stalked the family while he let his violent fantasies run wild. 3 generations of a family left to go camping on August 2, 1982. They set up camp in the Wells Grey Provincial Park. Located roughly 120 kilometers north of Kamloops in central British Columbia. They enjoyed several days of cloudy family time, picking berries during the day and gathering around the fire at night, having no idea that they were being stalked by a killer. Among the campers was grandparents Edith, 59, and George Bentley, aged 66. Their daughter, Jackie, 41, and son-in-law, Bob Johnson, 44. Also, the Johnsons' daughters, Janet, 13, and Karen, just 11. The Johnsons drove up with their daughters and pitched a tent for the girls. The grandparents brought a truck and camper where the adults would stay. The last anyone heard from the family was on August 6th when Edith called another daughter. It would not be until August 23rd that the family would first be reported missing. Bob Johnson was due back at work on August 16th, but didn't show. After a week with no word from him, his company filed a missing persons taints with the police. In spite of an extensive search, it didn't result in finding any of the family members. The biggest problems were the killer had a head start with plenty of time to kill, get rid of the victims' bodies, and cover his tracks. The other, maybe even bigger obstacle was no one knew exactly where the family was camping at. All anyone knew was that the family was camping in the Wells Grey area, which is massive. They had no idea where to even start, but alone being able to follow a trail to find the family. It would take 3 more weeks and a mushroom picker to find the family. On September 13th, the current discovery of the Johnsons' 1979 Plymouth was found. It had been burned beyond recognition as it set off to the side of a mountainside logging road. The car held the bodies of the 4 adults in the back seat and the 2 young girls in the trunk. The bodies were burned so thoroughly that when it came time to bury the family, they were all placed together in one child-sized casket. Through a forensic examination of the remains, it was determined they had been shot with a .22 caliber firearm. Locals were able to tell investigators where they had seen the family camped at. An examination of the area would turn a .22 casings, which helped identify the weapon used as a Remington pump-action rifle. What wasn't at the campsite was the truck and camper, the boat and camping gear brought with the family, or any trace of the family at all. With no suspect in custody or even in sight, the media was pushing for answers. A tip came in at the family's truck and camper had been spotted. The witnesses said it was being driven by 2 French Canadians in central Canada. The media sprang into action, throwing this up as their headline and demanding the killers to be caught. In April, with still no leave, the investigators knew they needed to get creative. They reenacted what they believed was the crime scene for TV cameras and aired it across Canada. The next month, the police drove a replica Ford camper truck to Ontario in Quebec in an attempt to draw awareness for what people should be looking in a for. What it did instead was flood the investigators with over 13,000 tips and sightings of the replica vehicle. The reward was raised from $7,500 to $10,000 for information leading to the truck. None of the tips led to the discovery of the camper and truck. It would be found by sheer luck. 2 forestry employees were working on a logging road and stumbled across it. The camper had sat there on Trophy Mountain for 14 months. Only a few kilometers away from the crime scene, the camper was burned out like the car holding the family's bodies. This left the authorities to believe they were looking for someone local to the Wells Gray area and not 2 French Canadians as they had been searching for, since it was more likely that a local would know about the locking roads and the area in general. Taking a closer look at the person who lived closest to the crime scene led them back to David Rulian Shearing, 24. They have received a tip about him earlier in the investigation. When they followed up, the tipster had quite a bit to tell them. I hear earlier Shearing had asked him about re-registering a Ford truck and how to repair a hole in its door. This was a tip that the police had never divulged after finding the truck. It had a bullet hole in the door. After an interrogation by the Royal Canadian Monet Police, Shearing confessed. He went so far as reenacting the murders for the detectives. He turned over evidence that he had stolen from the family and the murder weapon, the .22 caliber Remington rifle. The ballistic test would prove that this was the weapon used to kill the family. The same weapon that had been hanging on his walk the very first time the authorities went to ask him about the family, right after they had been reported missing. Maybe it was because his father was a prison guard or his brother was a sheriff. But Shearing wasn't suspected when first interviewed. In his confession, he gave details of how it all happened. He had first noticed the family when he set up camp, fixating on the 2 young girls. Then, over the next few days, he watched their every move. On the night of August 10th, Shearing watched as the adults sat around the campfire and had seen the girls go into their tent for the night. From a distance, he took out the 4 adults with sniper shots. He said he then killed the 2 girls from their tent as they slept. After he said he loaded all the bodies into the car and moved it to the logging road, then set it on fire with 5 gallons of gasoline. He then cleaned up the campground, removing the family's possessions including the camper and truck. It would only be later that he burned these as he was unable to transfer them into his name. He claimed that he killed the family because he wanted to rob them of their possessions. It wouldn't be until after Shearing was convicted that he gave his full confession of how and he had been stalking the family. It was the girls that he fantasized about having sex with that kept him interested. That's why after telling the adults he kidnapped the girls and took them to his property nearby. There, he raped and terrorized them for over a week. On August 16th, the day their father was due back at work, Shearing took Taryn away from her big sister. Once alone, he shot the girl in the back of the head. Janet would be left alive for one more day of torture before she would be killed like her sister. With the girls now dead, he took their bodies to the Johnsons' car where the other family members had been placed. He had actually only hidden the car in some bush. He put the girls in the trunk and got into the driver's seat with the 4 decomposing adult bodies in the back seat, driving it to its final resting place where it would be found by that mushroom pick for burned out. David Shearing pleaded guilty to 6 counts of murder. Shearing was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole for 25 years, the maximum penalty for second-degree murder. This would be the first time that this sentence was handed out in Canadian history. David Shearing, who changed his last name to his mother's maiden name of Ennis, was first eligible for parole in February 2008. The National Parole Board ruled against his release, citing that he was still having violent sexual fantasies and had not completed a sex offender treatment program, so he was not ready to be released. Again, in February 2012, he was turned down for parole, applying again in February 2014, but before his hearing, he withdrew his request. The National Parole Board has also been given a petition, which has over 15,000 signatures, advocating for the violent offender to never be released. In his own words at one of his parole hearings, David tries to plead for freedom, saying this about himself: "I was very selfish." He is supported by his wife that he narrate while in prison, Heather. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.